Greetings, my patrons, and welcome to the slightly overdue first monthly Q&A. I hope you all got my message in relation to this. Only got a few questions in, but we'll try and cover them all. Did get a couple of questions in about sort of me and sort of who I am personally, and what I do for a living. I hope you guys don't mind, but I'm just going to kind of abstain on my privacy for that one. I will tell you I'm based out of Edinburgh in the UK. But in terms of all your questions about lore and stuff, I'm more than happy to answer any of them. I hope you guys understand just that like YouTube isn't my first full-time job. So, you know, trying to remain slightly anonymous, as it were, at this stage in my YouTube career. But anyway, guys, let's delve into it. I was asked about my history with Warhammer itself and Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Well, I got into Warhammer in the early to mid-90s. I think it was still around 4th edition, actually. I think I got through it through school, in fact, and we went up to the Games Workshop place, me and a group of my friends, saw some cool looking models, and didn't really look back from there. The first and only army I've really collected, if I'm honest, maybe you could argue I had a bit of a Beastman army as well, but that's more just because it was associated with my Warriors of Chaos army, and that was always my go-to army, and I've only ever really collected Warriors of Chaos models. So they were very much my favorite faction on the tabletop. I like their sort of approach to anarchy, as it were. And, you know, they have some good points in their you know, enjoyment of the perhaps more sinful aspects of life. So yeah, I have a long-time follower of Chaos, long-time lover of Chaos. In terms of sort of what brought me and what inspired me to do this channel, a lot of you will know, I think my first idea for a video, maybe not the first video I posted, but it'll be up there, was the missing units video. And that was really just because, and it's really what started my entire channel really, was that I saw this video from a guy, I'm not necessarily going to name and shame, but I'm sure if you typed in missing units Total War Warhammer, you'd probably find the video I'm talking about. And he'd just done this video where he obviously hadn't quite grasped what was going on with Total War Warhammer, and that it was trying to replicate the tabletop, and was just saying things like, oh, the Empire needs dismounted Reiksguard to make it a balanced faction, and it kind of missed the entire point of both Warhammer and Total War Warhammer, in that its strength is its diversity of armies, and how each army plays differently and acts differently. And he was really talking through step by step about how to make all the armies almost exactly the same. And it just irked me slightly, and I was like, okay, I've been thinking about maybe getting into YouTube, not solely for Total War Warhammer, but for games in general, and that kind of kicked things off. Now, the areas I've been focusing on the channel on has been very much the stories in Warhammer. And at some point I would like to, and I think I will at some point, expand the channel to other game universes as well. And it's just because, you know what, guys, I like video games, but the primary reason I like video games is I've never really been a kind of Call of Duty, like just feel of shooting kind of that kind of player. I've always liked narratives and stories. So from adventure games to, and I suppose a lot of strategy games don't really have narrative, but a lot of strategy games allow you to form your own narrative, like Civ, that Gandhi being a violent bastard, stuff like that. You form your own narrative in a lot of strategy games, so I enjoy them as well. And of course, sort of RPGs and things like that. So I've always enjoyed a good story. And I think a lot of people, when they play through video games, myself included, I'm guilty of this as well, often kind of skip past some of the subtler aspects of the story and the universe. And so I really hope to, with this channel, as it expands and grows, is to just kind of bring the subtler aspects of game universes to the attention of people, really. But don't worry, I'm nowhere near finishing any kind of Total or any kind of Warhammer lore, so we'll be focused on Warhammer for the foreseeable future. But don't be surprised if later on in the channel you see me just doing a couple of lore videos here and there on different game universes. So just give you guys a heads up on that, but not in the immediate plans at all. Now, another great question I got was my reaction to the end times and why I don't really mention it in any of my lore videos. Now, there's kind of twofold reason for this. First off, I think I need to say that Age of Sigmar, as the game that took over from Warhammer Fantasy, is a perfectly fine game. Like, to play it if you just sat me in front of a game and said, play this game, Warhammer Fantasy Battle, or play this game, Age of Sigmar, you know, they'd both be perfectly fine games, and I wouldn't have an objection to either one of them or how they play. My problems with the End Time was that Games Workshop eradicated a very rich and diverse universe they'd spent decades building, and just wiped the floor with it, and just took it all, and I say took it all away, and some people say, but you can still buy the books. Of course you can still buy the books, but there's not going to be an ongoing continuation of the universe I like. There's not going to be any more stories from that universe, and that is upsetting, I suppose is the best word I can think of. I'm not sitting here in tears or anything, but it's anger-inducing. And so I don't really care about the mortal realms and all. I think the high fantasy direction also they took it in. If they'd done it and then kind of tried to like start off a universe where like the remnants have all escaped through a portal, but they're all still the same people and they all kind of they've all just found another world, they're all trying to carve out their own little bit of it, that would be okay. But this whole mortal realms thing, it doesn't really grab me, and I really have there's nothing really pulling me into that world, and I have no interest in the lore they're trying to develop for it, really. It's all just magically appearing out of portals and battling each other in heavenly armor, and there's no nitty-gritty. There's no, like, the daily drudgery of a peasant in Bretonnia, or, like, how tough it is to earn a living as a merchant in the Empire, trying to avoid being eaten by a giant every time you go on your route. There's none of that kind of stuff, and it's really that kind of I don't want to say grim, because the Sigmar stuff is grim as well to a certain degree, but just like that everyday stuff, the real tapestry of a universe from like the bottom rung of the social ladder right up to the lords and generals. That's what I liked about the Warhammer universe as it existed, and End Times doesn't really have any of that. Age of Sigmar doesn't really have any of that. End Times itself is an okay story. It's not the best told story in the world. There's some stupid stuff in there, but it's an okay story. I just don't like what it leads to. And I think particularly as far as Total War Warhammer is concerned, that starts very much, even before like the timeline, even before where the timeline was in Warhammer by the time End Times was rolling around. So that's why I tend to stick to my lore at that point, because particularly for Total War players who are maybe coming in new to the Warhammer lore, like, I don't think my lore is necessarily aimed at people who know all Warhammer lore already. They will know it already, and that's not who I'm aimed at. I'm aimed at people who are coming into Total War Warhammer who just want to get a little bit more out of the game by understanding the universe in which they're playing a little bit more. So that's what I try and aim it at, and so I try to end the timeline where the game picks up, essentially. So that's kind of my objection with End Times. It's just I don't like what they did with it, and the fact it was done for very business-like reasons as well, to try and secure their copyright for certain names and stuff like that, just adds that little cynical aftertaste to it that just irks me. So that's why I tend to skip out End Times stuff. There are some great stories in End Times, and maybe come the third game in the trilogy, just to like close things off, I might delve into some of the End Times stories, but don't expect to see that anytime in the near future, because I'm just trying to bring people up to speed on where Total War Warhammer picks up, really. So that's kind of my thinking on the End Time, guys. Let me know in the comments of the Patreon what you guys think of it yourselves, whether you like it, whether you don't like it, and whether you think there's an aspect of the lore in the Sigmar stuff. If there's something you've liked, let me know, and I'll maybe look into a bit more. But at the moment, there's sort of zero interest on my part. But let me know. You never know. You might draw me into that universe as well. And so another question I got in the comments for one of the videos was as far as the Phoenix King, Finubar, was concerned. I mentioned in that video that he's not really been a character before, but he is very much known as a seafarer, and people asked me if he was added in, how would I see him added in? Well, I would have loved to have seen him added in as a High Elf Admiral, because he is very much known as Finubar the Seafarer. He's known for having traveled the majority of the Warhammer world. He's a very well-known explorer, so it would be very cool to have him as kind of a leader of an Admiral fleet. But we know there's no naval combat, but we'll have to wait and see what transpires in terms of naval mechanics in Total War Warhammer 2. And that about wraps up. Oh, actually, no, there's one more question I want to answer before we go into. I'm going to add a little bit of lore into this Q&A for you guys because don't have a huge list of questions to go through. So, you know what? I'll fill it up with a little bit of lore as well. But the last question I'm going to address is someone asked me whether I think Lord Nurglich will be added as a starting legendary lord for Total War Warhammer 2. Now, for those of you who don't know who Lord Nurglich is he is the leader of a clan of Skaven known as Clan Pestilence. And if you guys have watched my Lizardmen, likely legendary lords, you'll know that Clan Pestilence has a history with the Prophet of Sotek. Now, my thinking is that Nurglich won't be, although Pestilence is the best known Skaven clan to have anything to do with Lustria and that area of the world, they're kind of the most tied into that area. I think there'll be a starting faction, but I don't think we'll see Nurglich himself as a kind of individual character until we get the DLC pack, which will be something like the Serpent and the Rat, or the Viper and the Rodent, or something along those lines, where we'll get the legendary lord, the Prophet of Sotek, and we'll get Nurglich in together. That's my thinking on that. But watch out, guys. I am doing a collaboration either towards the back end of this week with someone you may well know, and we are going to be talking through the lore and potential DLC packs that are tied into lore-related stuff later on this week. So watch out for that video. Now, in terms of the lore, now we are going to cover the Dreadsaurus. Now, a lot of you guys who will have watched my army for the Lizardmen will have known I mentioned the Dreadsaurus. The Dreadsaurus is the terrible lizard beast that went around in the primordial days of the Lustrian jungle, fighting and battling with the should we say, the ancestors of the dragons. One maybe wouldn't classify them as dragons yet, but the creatures that would go on to become dragons. That's how long ago these two things were battling with one another. And it said the Dreadsaurus is the reason that you don't find dragons in Lustria today, because they simply hunted them to extinction. These things are just uncontrollable monsters. The apex predator of Lustria, but very, very rare and often seldom seen. Some lizard men will go their whole lives of never seeing a Dreadsaurus. When they are captured by the lizard men, they're often sort of not implanted, but have these ceremonial and magical armors placed upon them, because these are the only methods by which the Slann mage priests, through their kind of telepathic control, can even hope to point these guys in the right direction in the middle of a battlefield. They won't take any riders, so you won't see anyone using one of these bad boys as a mount, but the Slann mage priests can kind of point them in the right direction, and they can reap absolute havoc. Now, these guys, the reason I didn't involve them in the Lizardmen video is because they're actually a Forge World model. Now, Forge World models we haven't seen make an appearance in Total War Warhammer series as of yet. In the Russian leak, yes, it was mentioned that we're likely to get Chaos Dwarves, which were Forge World models themselves, but that hasn't happened yet, so we just don't know. So Forge World models are a bit up in the air as to whether any of them will ever be translated over to Total War Warhammer, which is one of the reasons I missed the Dreadsaurus out. The other being that I wasn't 100% sure whether this was, how new this model was and how integrated it was, and whether it was just an Age of Sigmar model. But it did have rules on Fantasy Battle on the tabletop, and it was an absolute beast. So it has this ceremonial armor that gives it also magical properties. So not only does it allow the Slann mages to control these monsters, it gives them the ability to become ethereal, so that they get that physical resistance from etherealness. They have impact hits on the tabletop, which essentially means they have devastating charge, and when they charge into something, they get extra attacks. So just means that in Total War Warhammer, these guys would just have a huge charge impact. They're tough as nails, so they're ethereal, they have flaming attacks, they have Killing Blow as well, which is an ability we've seen some hero units have on Total War Warhammer so far. They're unbreakable, and they can do Ambush, which would, I think, probably translate most accurately to Total War Warhammer as Stalk, so they would be able to be hidden. So not only is it a devastating wrecking train, but you wouldn't see it until it's right on you as well. So just an absolutely terrifying monster on the tabletop, and I fingers crossed it does get introduced into Total War Warhammer 2 as well, because it would just be horrific to see. So this absolute monstrosity, eater of dragons, just a terrible, terrible beast, and that's the Dreadsaurus, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed that little bit of extra lore on the Dreadsaurus there, guys. Absolute monster, as you can see. As for what's coming up on the channel, you guys know the order I'm doing these 4 starting factions in for Total War Warhammer 2. So watch out for the High Elf Army video. There's also 2 collaborations coming up. The first I've recorded, the second one I haven't. The first one I think you'll very much enjoy. It's on the mechanics of Total War Warhammer 2 and what is on our wish list for that. So look out for that probably in the next couple of days. But yeah, a lot of exciting things going on, guys. Keep your eyes peeled on the channel. One thing you should all be aware of, though, is I do have the poll coming up for you guys of the ranks that it's applicable to be able to vote on the next video. Now, I have the High Elf Army lined up. I have a couple of collaborations lined up. And I'll just tell you guys now, I want to do a video on the Amazons in the next... within this week at some point, but I'm going to put up other options for my video after those ones I've just mentioned, which will go up lore-wise, and you guys will get the pick. I'll put up 4 options for you. Vote on the poll that will show up. Probably later on today, I'll put up that poll, and then I will do the one that gets the most votes. So you guys pick my next lore video that's not one of the ones I just mentioned. Alright guys, thanks so much for supporting me on this Patreon. You don't understand, it means an awful lot to me. You guys are really fantastic going that extra mile, and I want you to know I hugely appreciate it. Other than that, guys, thanks as always, and I will catch you on the next monthly Q&A. And if you have any questions for that, just drop them in the comments, and I will address them for the next video. Alright guys, thanks again.